Okay, I think we're going to start. Did that work? I didn't think so. I think we're going to start. No. Hello.
Test 1, 2, 3. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
It looks like it's working. Not for these people.
Should it work for them too?
Well, there is no mic in this room. There's no
It's
probably for the option.
Problem solved. Okay.
Anything else?
No.
They want to put around the state, they have to push.
So anyone in here, if you want to ask questions, make sure you press your mic. There'll be a little light that lights up when you press down. Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, thank you all for coming. So when we get to question period, you push the little thing in front of you till you see green. You cannot ask a question until you see green. Thank you all for coming to our public discussion with first of our candidates for the position of Director of the International Programs Office and Associate Dean of the Outreach School. My name is David Messenger. I'm the chair of the search committee. At the end of this process, if you come to multiple ones of these, or even if you just come to one of these, if you would send me your comments about who you want to be the next head of the International Programs Office, I will collect those. My email is dmesseng, D-M-E-S-S-E-N-G, @uwyo.edu. So please make sure that you do that, and I'll collect all the comments I get. You will be doing that this week, if you're going to do that. Next week, too bad. So with that, I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Carrie Wojenski. She is the Director of the Global Affairs Center at the Sacred Heart University in Connecticut. She has a PhD from Rutgers University in International Education, has been working in international programs generally for a number of years, and is going to talk to us about internationalization at the university. Carrie.
I haven't even started. Thank you. Good afternoon at this point to everyone. How are you? Thank you for inviting me today. As David said, my name is Carrie Wojenski. I'm the Executive Director of Global Affairs at Sacred Heart University, a mid-sized comprehensive about an hour and a half outside of New York City. But I've also spent time working at Rutgers, a large public land-grant institution, so a like-minded institution to University of Wyoming. So this is a conversation that I've been looking forward to for about a week and a half now, to talk with you about a little louder? How are we doing? Loud enough? All right. Feel free to give me hand signals if I need to be a little bit louder.
You're good.
Very good. Thank you. I'll let you guys keep an eye on them, make sure that they can hear me. If they're flailing, you can tell me. So I've been looking to forward to this conversation for quite some time because this is an opportunity for me to express to you both where I come from in terms of internationalization and my vision in terms of what I know about University of Wyoming, where you are now, and how you can successfully build on where you've been to continue to go where you want to be. Not knowing who I was presenting to, I wanted to scaffold this conversation. I wanted to start with a macro level overview of how did we get to internationalization in the first place? What the heck is it? A discussion of the current college student population, some case study on how internationalization connects to them, a look at where you have been within the past few years at the University of Wyoming, and then where we can build on from there, and my vision of internationalization at the institution. But first, we would like to start out with really how did we get here? And so exactly 100 years ago today, our world was engaged in its first major global conflict. It was the Great War, World War I. Following a policy of isolationism, excuse me for the altitude, isolationism, the United States would not enter World War I for another year. By the end of the war, individuals, businesses, politicians, societies, and nations realized that they were systemically connected to each other. We were no longer individual nations. We all had a connection to each other. The dawn of modern globalization was truly here for us. Globalization is the movement of people, ideas, goods, capital, services, pollution, and even diseases across borders. And so 100 years beyond today, 100 years beyond World War I, we're here today, we're in this room. Our policies are no longer in isolation, our businesses are no longer in isolation, and our shared survival is no longer in isolation. And yet, our hearts and our minds are still pretty isolated. We act in the world, and yet we don't understand it. We isolate ourselves from difference and from understanding the lived experiences of others. Yet our shared survival depends on our ability to connect with those experiences and ways of living that do differ from our own. And embracing our differences, we're able to embrace our strengths for the betterment of our global community. So globalization is here, and internationalization is higher education's response to that reality. Internationalization is how the university, us, and the faculty change lives and shape our global future. Internationalization is truly our new reality. It is the conscious effort to integrate and infuse international, intercultural, and global dimensions into the ethos, into the outcomes of post-secondary education, to infuse it into everything that we do. To be fully successful, it must involve the active and responsible engagement of the academic community. So if internationalization is our new reality, it's also quite personal. I wanted to provide you a sense of my story of internationalization. My story of internationalization is about a book and about a professor that ultimately set me on the path to become the person I am today, and that really led me to stand before you today. In college, I was a freshman, I was reserved, it was a new experience for me. I was a little anxious about being in school, trying to find my place in the world, and yet, even though I was reserved and unsure about where I fit into my university, where I fit into being this 19, 20-year-old, I knew that I wanted to study abroad. I thought, okay, I'd go to Italy because I studied Italian in high school. I thought, I should probably go to Ireland, I have my Irish heritage. And that sounded great. I had made some really comfortable decisions in some pretty comfortable locations. So I told my professor, and he was of a completely different mind. And I was really lucky because my professor did not say, well, why the heck would you want to go study abroad somewhere else? You came here for a reason. We know what we're doing. You're learning from us. We have these bright minds, and you don't really need to get any information elsewhere. Why would you go? You see, he had the attitudes and the experiences to understand the value of knowledge obtained by engaging with difference, by engaging with otherness. He'd conducted collaborative research with colleagues around the world. He infused his lectures with and learning outcomes with international and intercultural themes, and he modeled a passionate respect for the inclusion of multiple voices and perspectives into the conversation. So my professor handed me a book, and it was a book of study abroad programs. And in this book were places that I had never thought to go, let alone study in: Mongolia, Morocco, Japan, and Jakarta. I chose to study abroad in Samoa, a small island in the South Pacific. So my path was in front of me. I share this with you today. Samoa was an uncomfortable decision, physically, mentally, culturally, socially, and personally. I was challenged every day. Frustrations were felt, smiles were shared, and yes, there were a few tears shed as well. But I learned another way of living, another way of thinking, and really another way of being human. And so I came back to the U.S. with a new purpose. I wanted to share my personal experiences of discovery and change with others, and I wanted to really keep discovering. So I became friends with the girls down the hall. One was from China, and her roommate was from Turkey. I became a peer advisor in the study abroad office, and I spoke with freshmen and sophomores about the wider world that they should experience. And then I figured out that conveying my passion for international education and other cultures was actually a career. I started out by working for an educational travel company that brought high school language teachers and their high school groups abroad short term. And then that led me to, after 2 years, I worked in Mexico for that company. I relocated with them there. And then eventually I moved back to the U.S. and pursued further education that helped me to become a study abroad advisor. My first university job hired me because I had had that work in Mexico. I lived in Mexico in the same city as one of their university partners. And while working at that university, I was able to obtain my doctorate, which of course led to greater and greater experiences and opportunities. So in my life, each opportunity presented to me was built on the foundation laid out to me by my study abroad experience. As an advisor, as an educator, and as a mentor, I've been able to advise and support hundreds and probably, I don't want to count at this point, but maybe thousands of students in broadening their worldviews through intercultural engagement, through study abroad. The students that I sent abroad, they came back changed, and the ones that I was supporting to study here in the U.S., they were changed as well. For example, one of my former study abroad students spent her semester abroad as part of an international research team as an undergraduate, and she was on a team that was working to find a cure for cancer. Another wrote me a few years ago, out of the blue, and he had said, "Thank you for everything. Without your guidance and encouragement, I would have not have studied abroad. You sowed the seeds for the love of education and travel into my heart, and it is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life." And without this professor that I had so many years ago, I would have not been able to have influenced these students, to help shape them, to help drive them. I would have missed shaping their lives to live the global good, and I really wouldn't be in front of you here today. And that is why I say that internationalization is an imperative. So what is truly internationalization when we say this? Internationalization is the university's opportunity and your opportunity to pack the bags of your students' minds with the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and experiences that they need to respond to the challenges of today in order to shape the global future for us that we wish for tomorrow. So the class of 2019 is this year's college freshmen. Mostly are 18, and they were mostly born in 1997. So if you said to them around the turn of the century, they might very well ask you which one. Kyoto has always symbolized inactivity about global climate change. 15 nations have always been constructing the International Space Station. Hong Kong has always been under Chinese rule. And CNN has always been available en español. The class of 2019 lives in a world that is more interconnected and more global than it has ever been before, and yet we find our students still adrift. Every year, a report is published called the American Freshman National Norms. It's based on the responses of first-time, full-time freshmen. The study offers several insights today into today's freshman class. Among them, that students are confident in their ability to tolerate others with different beliefs and to work cooperatively with diverse groups of people, and yet many lack the actual experiences to work with people from different backgrounds. So we began with the question, really, how did we get here? And really, what is today's global reality? Who are our students, and what should be and what is the response of higher education in this reality? So now we need to ask the question of ourselves, where do we need to go? So if our own ignorance to our intellectual and emotional isolation, if we're not aware of these things, if we have to move past them, we as educators need to acknowledge the imperative need to internationalize our institutions for the benefit of all. Because it's not only about the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes that we have, but truly what we do with these knowledge, skills, and attitudes. It's also about the actions and the responsibilities reflecting upon oneself, one's surroundings, and it's about the U.S. and our interconnectedness with the world, and about what connections are being made and what is being connected. So internationalization in the institution must be endemic. Only in recent years has higher education truly begun to think about internationalization holistically and in a comprehensive manner. So where we see internationalization moving is a trend towards comprehensive internationalization. Some of you I know in the audience here are quite familiar with this term. Some this might be new for, so I'll delve into it a little bit. Comprehensive international education, as defined by the American Council on Education, is a strategic, coordinated process that seeks to align and integrate policies, programs, and initiatives to position colleges and universities as more globally oriented and more internationally connected institutions. The ACE model, the American Council on Education model for comprehensive internationalization, is comprised of 6 interconnected target areas for institutional initiatives, policies, and programs. We're seeing a sizable, here we go. So I want to break down those 6 columns for you and provide you an example at my current institution to highlight what they are. So we're seeing a sizable increase in colleges and universities with global, international, and/or intercultural priorities in their mission statements and within their strategic plans. Beyond lip service, more and more institutions are creating specific supporting strategic plans for internationalization, ones that complement the master plan of the institution and flesh it out as well to provide guidance for internationalization. So at Sacred Heart, just like you've done here at UW, we underwent the 2-year process of self-study through the American Council on Education's Internationalization Laboratory. Mouthful. We took stock of our current international and global initiatives. We collected and analyzed information as a basis for the internationalization plan. We identified our strengths and weaknesses and really where we wanted to move forward, possibilities for new strategic activities, and we, most importantly, engaged people across the institution in a discussion of internationalization. You can see one of our sessions here. We had over 50 faculty and staff participate in creating this self-study, much like you did here as well. And many more voices were incorporated into this conversation beyond just those 50 people. These efforts resulted in a university-wide strategic plan for internationalization that did complement and flesh out our master plan and fulfilled our mission. Such an explicit display of internationalization goals and objectives really conveys a lot of gravity. A specific plan for internationalization articulates an institutional's commitment to internationalization. It frames explicit goals. It provides a roadmap on how the heck to do it. And, more importantly, it holds the institution accountable. University leaders are taking strategic plans for internationalization even one step further by establishing more robust administrative, reporting, and funding structures to form the essential framework for implementing internationalization. University leaders are more and more now engaged in the process from start and continue to champion it throughout its many, many iterations. So we did this as a process of steady centralization of our internationalization efforts, whether that might have been represented through an organizational chart or a representation of breaking down silos and actually communicating better with each other between our colleagues, our departments, and our functional units. Another very large element of internationalization is what's called internationalization at home. That's internationalization in our curriculum and increasingly within our co-curriculum. Universities are ensuring that all students, whether they go abroad or not, whether they are exposed to an international or intercultural perspective, and that they're building global competencies. General education requirements are being included in the undergraduate curriculum, including courses that focus on languages, regional studies, and global issues. Major courses are incorporating more international and diverse perspectives by including non-U.S., non-Western, and non-English centric reading materials, comparative perspectives, differing opinions, and diverse thoughts, including those underrepresented voices and views within the major curriculum, in a purposeful effort to highlight the global issues and perspectives within those fields. Technology is being leveraged to create very innovative ways to include and enhance global learning, such as through joint discourse, collaboration, and coursework with students and faculty abroad. For example, something I've been talking a lot about today is collaborative online international learning. That's becoming becoming the buzzword for something that's been going on that had no word prior to this. So, for example, collaborative online international learning, kind of exactly what it sounds like. So this is where our faculty engage. They bring our domestic students together with international students, whether it's for a module, for a project-based learning or a problem-based learning initiative, and it brings them together synchronously and asynchronously so that they can learn from each other, get this global and international, intercultural exposure without necessarily having to go abroad, or maybe that's their first toe in the water. So they're gaining these intercultural competencies in a facilitated way as connected to their major. And the more and more they have of these, the more systemic it becomes within the institution, the closer you become to your larger learning goals. This is a photo of one of our business classes. This is our business class working abroad with a university in Bangkok, but they're working with an IT class abroad. This group had to create an online marketplace, and the student group abroad had to build it. So not only did they have to deal with language difference, they had to deal with time zone difference, they had to learn new ways to articulate what they wanted in this online store. And so not only did they have this intercultural component, but they also got a real life taste of what it means when you graduate to be working in a cross-cultural, in a multi-country employment situation and having project teams all around the world. That was one really nice example of COIL, of collaborative online international learning. So not only is this happening in the curriculum, but campus-wide learning outcomes goals are including internationally focused competencies and developing measures to assess them accordingly. And increasingly, these competencies are being mandated by either your professional accrediting bodies and evaluated during your university-wide reaccreditation. So it's a very nice way to leverage your accreditation body to your internationalization goals. And so not only is it being pursued for the curricular internationalization of academic goals, it's also used as a measure, as a means to enhance the competitive advantage of students, colleges, and nations within the global economy. The co-curricular is taking a broader and stronger role in exposing students to these international perspectives and in building these global competencies. Programs and activities that address global issues and reinforce the international elements of the curriculum, as well as facilitate the discussion and interaction among students of differing backgrounds, are becoming much more common and much more international. So here we have, as part of an international and global speaker series, we virtually brought in the U.S. ambassador of Norway, the Norwegian ambassador to the U.S. To talk with our students on topics of Norway's relevance on the global stage. Our students represented here were interested in a broad range of things. They were global studies students, they were English language learners, they were business students, they were biology students, a very diverse population. And their questions from the ambassador represented the kind of dialogue and engagement that we hope to see outside of the classroom. In addition, faculty policies and procedures are being reimagined as part of an internationalized institution. International experiences, work, research, and interests are being considered in both the hiring process and in the tenure and promotion policies. Increasingly, universities are supporting increased opportunities for faculty to teach, conduct research, attend conferences, lead groups abroad, and they're recognizing the value of these activities. Indeed, they're being leveraged such that recent studies have established an increased citation rates when faculty engage in multi-country collaboration and publish with internationally diverse co-authors and teams. So to support such efforts that both enhance the faculty profile and the institutional profile as a research institution, more workshops, seminars, and programs are being created to help faculty build the intercultural competencies needed and incorporate the international perspectives back into their teaching. The research feeds the teaching, which feeds the international, and becomes this very nice cycle of support and engagement. So for one thing that I did at my institution, for example, is I started both a site visit program, so our faculty can visit our global partners abroad, as well as created a faculty fellow for curricular internationalization. So our faculty can get the tools that they need to build those intercultural competencies and to learn pedagogically how to integrate them back into the classroom for themselves and their students. So student mobility is perhaps the most visible and familiar target area of comprehensive internationalization. It's the most glamorous, the most attractive element, to say the least. And this is also something that is transforming. The outward flow of domestic students engaged in study abroad programs and the inward flow of international students studying abroad in the U.S. is being more purposefully managed in an effort to help facilitate student adjustment and to maximize their learning. It is no longer separate from the curricular, the co-curricular. It's not this thing that happens over there. It is becoming a systemic part of the institutional thought and the institutional strategy. Because we once thought that if we dropped students abroad into another culture, into another country, they would automatically and magically learn to adjust and learn these great intercultural competencies. And we now know that that is not the case. The research has shown time and time again, it doesn't work. Guided facilitation is what is necessary to help students achieve these attended learning outcomes through these mobility programs. So the professionalization of the managing student mobility includes the enhanced efforts to create programs that help study abroad students integrate the knowledge gained while abroad into their overall program of study and into their overall understanding of life. And so across the university, we've implemented learning goals associated with global competencies and study abroad. And not only is this important when the accreditors come knocking, and they do, it's also part of our pledge to ensure that students are gaining the knowledge, skills, compassions that they need to become 21st century global citizens. There we go. And insofar as the international students on campus, there are the academic and support program structures in place to facilitate their integration and success into all aspects of campus life. And the development and enhancement of such services continues to be a target area for improvement. Within the last 6 months, we've seen this in my professional field emphasized even more. As institutions learn about how it is important to meet the diverse and differing needs as compared to a large international body at whole, really addressing specific international groups' needs and facilitating them not only upon arrival but throughout the years here on campus. 4 years, 2 years, however long that they stay here. So providing the structures to support, serve, and retain the international students, not as a monolith but as individuals, has become an even more essential as universities look towards increasing international recruitment as a way to prop up perhaps decreased domestic enrollments and to enhance the diversity in the campus. And states too are taking note of this. In Wyoming alone, international students contribute over $22 million to your economy. So everyone's keeping an eye on what it means to bring international students here, but what it means to support them holistically and academically and truly successfully. So here's an example. We have some of our international students experiencing American culture by making gingerbread houses for the first time. And while this might seem trivial, this is their study abroad experience. What we expect our students to have abroad, we expect to provide our international students as well. Such cultural programming helps students connect with their host country, helps learn about our culture, the culture that we're sharing with them, and ultimately helps improve their retention and their success. So the final area of comprehensive internationalization is in collaboration and partnership. Whereas in the past the quantity of partnerships was measured, we're now seeing a purposeful move towards depth, not breadth. No longer are we seeking only transactional partnerships, one student there goes there, one student comes back here. We're now, that are only truly focused on student exchange, we're now seeing universities seeking transformational partnerships. Those that transform or change entire departments, offices, colleges, institutions through a generation of common goals, common projects, common products, where both partners, both sides become come out from the relationship transformed, changed in a way. And viewing these linkages as combined resources and as a source of institutional growth and collaborative learning. This is where we're seeing partnership development moving. So for the benefit of my institution, I imagine most institutions, we're always seeking new transformative partnerships abroad, which is why we take measures to participate in the national dialogue. This is a photograph of our participation in the Institute for International Education, a very large, well-known international education body here in the U.S. This is their academic partnership program to Norway, and it was an opportunity for us and some of our colleagues to engage in the Norwegian higher education system, to learn about it, to find commonalities, to find linkages, to meet with potential partner universities, and to learn about Norwegian higher education and how we as an institution might engage with this country. So comprehensive internationalization is the way forward for U.S. colleges and universities. So let's talk Wyoming. University of Wyoming, internationalization here. The University of Wyoming, I commend you. You are forward-thinking when it comes to embedding comprehensive internationalization into the institution. Already, your guiding principles reflect the social and economic elements necessary to positively and successfully engage in the world. Your mission statement recognizes the importance of bringing your students into the world and the world back into Wyoming. And your strategic plan specifically references elements of comprehensive internationalization in several of its goals and objectives, among them preparing graduates to be competent in a global economy and contribute to Wyoming and abroad and beyond. To demonstrate progress, success, and excellence in UW activities conducted around the world, you've got that there. To serve UW and Wyoming community by developing cultural enrichment opportunities for the benefit of all, and to add value diversity by engaging enhanced dialogue and intercultural competencies and development. These are all elements of internationalization, of comprehensive internationalization. So I commend you for already having these in place, by already embedding such components into your guiding principles, your mission, your strategic plan. It demonstrates the institutionalization of of your activities and provides a clear, consistent message and pathway for moving forward. So in 2011, you took this commitment one step further by participating in the American Council on Education's Internationalization Laboratory. Having chaired the same process back at my home institution, I can understand and sympathize with you. That was such a massive undertaking. Congratulations for doing it. Congratulations for recognizing the importance. You formed an interdisciplinary, university-wide internationalization leadership team to conduct an in-depth self-study on current internationalization activities and a review of your institutional goals. And so you recognized that Wyoming's future business leaders, entrepreneurs, and workforce must be able to work with and understand people across the world, and that your industries and your economies needed this expanded interconnectedness to work with globally competing pressures. You understood that UW students needed to find pragmatic and thoughtful solutions to increasingly complex global problems that they're going to face. That international research cooperation and enterprise would continue to be a source of excellence for your institution. And that you must be able to recruit the best, the brightest, and the most talented students, faculty, and staff, no matter where they come from, to continue to be a world-class university. And you recognize that UW staff, students, and faculty must be provided with the avenues to benefit from the interactions with your international colleagues, both inside and outside of the classroom. So in 2013, your process culminated with the creation of not a strategic plan, but recommendations for internationalization, with a vision statement that reflected the voices of the university and the Wyoming community. Your recommendations included strengthening support for faculty development, developing an English language support center, appointing an internationalization implementation task force, providing critical language learning and augmenting language offerings, expanding internationalization outreach to Wyoming communities and enhanced commitments to P-16 partnerships in education, and developing university-wide global learning outcomes. In addition, after a thorough site visit from your American Council on Education peer review team, they provided you with additional recommendations of encouraging faculty collaboration in international research as part of your land grant mission, expanding student participation in international research, improving international student recruitment and retention, and expanding staff internationalization opportunities. First, I would like to say that, the UW faculty, staff, and these internationalization team put together an extremely comprehensive review and thorough list of its strategic priorities, focusing on its areas of excellence, focusing on where you wanted to be as an institution. And now we're about 3 years past this process since this list of recommendations was presented to the UW community. Some of these items have received immediate attention, others are still underway, and some still do remain to be realized. So of course, any vision for internationalization of UW requires an understanding of the institution and the continued collaboration with the stakeholders across the university, continuing this open dialogue, this open conversation. A primary responsibility of the new Associate Dean for the new Associate Dean and the Director of International Programs will be to champion the recommendations presented in the self-study and by the American Council on Education, but more importantly to create the structures and supports to see these recommendations come to fruition. As Director, I'd continue to the practice of an open dialogue and collaboration with the university's academic departments, its students, its staff, and of course the greater Wyoming community. The International Programs Office would continue to serve as a supporting structure, a knowledge hub, and a source of advocacy for comprehensive internationalization. In support of continued momentum, I would create a standing council on internationalization and leverage regional and professional accrediting bodies to drive the ongoing assessment of global learning outcomes and the institutionalization of the culture of internationalization. I would also work with the UW Foundation to create a global giving campaign and strategies, one which would direct donors to fund student scholarships, international student support, faculty development and research, and other internationalization activities. In support of the Wyoming community, in addition to acting as a resource hub, the IPO and I would serve the state and the university's land grant mission by working with colleagues and constituents to pursue international development grants, such as those administered by USAID, the WHO, and UNESCO. Finally, I would support the heart of the UW community, its students and its faculty. Without students, without faculty, internationalization cannot be realized. You are the driving focus of internationalization. For students, I would work to ensure that all students, regardless of whether or not they traveled abroad, regardless of whether or not they had their international experience here, would receive an academic and co-curricular education that is both international and intercultural. For faculty, I would support and facilitate their individual international interests, as well as create faculty fellow positions, such as the curricular internationalization, mentorship opportunities, and communities of practice to support those goals. I'd like to close by reading a paragraph from the Association of American Councils and Universities publication, An Education for the 21st Century, Stewardship of the Global Commons. The Earth has become a place of global cultures in all of their valued particularities and increasingly a global commons in all of its necessary interdependence. An appropriate university education must prepare women and men for the participation in these cultures and this commons. Ours is a world being transformed by transnational flow of goods and capital, people and practices, by the unraveling of the nation states, and by the rapid rise of new forms of technology. There is an urgent need to prepare young people to negotiate such complexities. A global education must take an approach that is generally more interdisciplinary, more collaborative, and more attuned to stewardship than to narrow self-interest. It is also an education that compels students and those who teach them to come not just to know what is familiar and what is already one's own, but to seek understanding of others and to welcome the opportunity to learn what those who are different from them have and discovered about our common humanity and our common habitation of this planet. Internationalization is our new reality, and I cannot wait to see the many, many ways in which UW rises to greet it. Thank you.
We have about 12 minutes for questions. So anyone have any questions? Just raise your hand, maybe introduce yourself, and then ask away. Yes.
Mark,
Oh, yes, and push your green button. It is broken.
Mark Peterson, College of Business. Your thoughts on engaging youth into the high school?
One more time, what are my thoughts?
Yeah, your thoughts on going deep into the high school experience to prepare students to get ready to plan for international integration with university level.
Absolutely. We'll use the
Could you
microphone.
please repeat the question because we didn't hear it here at the remote side?
Sure. The question was, what are my thoughts about deeply engaging the K-12, K-16 population, the high school population in Wyoming, since they are most of your population here at the institution? Certainly, the earlier you can get them working in a global mindset, the better you are, the more prepared you have students. And one of the trends that we are seeing most recently with comprehensive internationalization is college is the end game. University is the end game. It's how do we engage in comprehensive internationalization at that K-12 level, because they are what's feeding us. I understand that some of your schools have started to develop language initiatives in critical languages, but it goes beyond that. It involves understanding difference. It involves understanding comparative perspectives and being able to create compassionate students and open students. And so I would like to see what the departments here are doing in terms of already engaging in the K-12 to see how we can help through those departments infuse more of an intercultural, international perspective. Perhaps creating programming for some of the K-12 teachers to have a global experience in and of themselves. There's several grants and opportunities externally that are directed towards K-12 faculty, towards K-12 teachers, and being able to present those opportunities to them, and perhaps the structural and support resources that the IPO offers would allow those K-12 teachers to learn, to improve, to develop their professional knowledge and bring that home for their students. Another program that I have seen in one of my partner institutions abroad was it was a Touch an American program. And it sounds funny, but it was actually quite an interesting program where they brought an international student into the K-12 classroom. Sometimes that was the first time they'd see an American. And so the flip side is, how can you engage your international students to be connected to the community through this volunteer service learning opportunity, where the students can engage with this new person, this person that they may not have had access to before, whether depending on how old the person is, maybe it's a country presentation, this is our national flag, this is our national animal, moving up towards some of those higher level world history comparative perspectives, and giving just students access and dialogue. And the more access and dialogue you can work with K-12 to provide, the more prepared your students are going to be when they get here to have those critical engagement and critical reflection experiences, and they'll be ready for that next step. Mm-hmm.
Any questions in Casper?
Yes, this is Oksana Wasilek, an instructional designer at UW Casper, and I have a question about, I have actually two questions. The first one that you mentioned was when you talked about what UW has done and it was recommended through the internationalization lab, one of the things that were mentioned was opportunities for staff development internationally. So I was wondering if you can talk more about that, because I know as a former staff member, recently I've been changed to a faculty type position, so I got more opportunities as a faculty to access international opportunities than as a former staff member, so I would like you to talk more about that first.
Sure, there's a couple ways that it can go, and perhaps a combination of many. Some schools are starting to invest in staff exchange with your international partners abroad. So you can take a week or two, res life here, res life there, swap them out, or an instructional designer abroad, and then you can enhance your partnership relationship, your transformative partnership, but also provide the international experience and professional development for your local staff as well. Not only does it help them become more connected to your partners abroad, but when your domestic staff comes back, it gives them an additional sense of what it means to be an international person abroad, to be out of your element, so it does help drive more understanding for your inbound international population. That's one element. Another element is looking at small funding and grant opportunities internally for staff to internationalize their divisions. So to either go to a professional conference that does look at that to present an international research paper, or to find other ways where international and intercultural competencies can be infused with their own units, because a lot of focus truly is at the faculty level, but we mentioned this whole co-curricular piece. University life in the U.S. is about a holistic education, and so you need to be able to internationalize both the curricular and the co-curricular. And by providing staff the professional development opportunities, whether that is through workshops on intercultural competency, whether that is through seed funding to help them internationalize or interculturalize an element of their work, or to try and get them abroad for short-term periods as well.
Thank you. And my second question was about transformational partnership. Can you talk more about what you mean by transformational partnerships for the collaborations and partnerships? And because you mentioned a little bit, but I would like to understand more what you mean by that.
Sure. Terminology, transactional and transformational partnerships. Transactional partnerships are, I give you one student, you give me one of your students. I give you a faculty member, you give me one of mine. It's bodies. It is not necessary, it's looking at the flow of peoples. It's not necessarily looking at what's being accomplished, what's being developed. A transformational partnership involves a lot more investment in terms of human capacity, in terms of knowledge capacity, in terms of strategic capacity. Why do these two institutions need to collaborate, or two departments need to collaborate, and what can we jointly produce together? How can we transform our research, our teaching, our understanding through these practices? I'll give you a professional example, our clinical programming. We have short-term clinical programming abroad for our health professions and our nurses, and we have been developing partnerships with both university and clinics, NGOs abroad. And we are there to fulfill our clinical needs for our students, to give them the education that they need, but we're also working with our partners to understand what needs that they have that we can help them fulfill, whether it's through health needs assessments, whether it is through fundraising that we can do. And they, in turn, are able to provide us a comparative perspective. They are, sometimes we bring them in as guest lecturers or virtually, and they are enabled to increase the diversity of our teaching staff as well by having a flow that does not just think about swapping out bodies, but what knowledge capacity do you bring to the table? What do I bring to the table? And how can we improve and enrich both of our practices more? And so it's a lot of dialogue. It's a relationship. It is not something that you can sign and step away from. It takes a lot of nurturing.
Thank you very much.
Well,
One more question, Susan?
Thanks. So, Carrie, you were saying among your accomplishments here on your CV that you restructured and consolidated short-term faculty-led program budgets to foster growth and development. And not only did you restructure the budget, but then this led to a 400% increase in the number of programs. So I wondered if you'd talk a little bit about what you did there and why did it result in an increase?
sometimes there's things that just don't align and don't make sense, and you need to come in and take a look at why those happen and what you can do to move forward. And that's what I walked into when I started at Sacred Heart. Every institution does budgeting differently, so it is always unique to every institution. The way that we did our faculty-led programming varied, and so we needed to find a consistent way. We had accounts that at the end of the year would roll over to the general fund and would be lost. We had other accounts that would roll over year to year but didn't necessarily have new programming going into them. And so what we found is that we had a few pretty successful faculty-led programs that would perhaps generate funds, but the funds would just sit there. They weren't needed for future program development in that program because the program was fine. But we would have a lot of new great programs being proposed, ones that we'd try and recruit for that just couldn't make it through that recruiting phase, whether it was a development issue that there wasn't enough hands-on site experience, or we didn't have the numbers to run. And so what we did in collaboration with the business office, the provost's office, is we put all of our faculty-led money in one pot. The faculty fees, the tuition came into it, the program fees came into it, all faculty expenses were paid through that. And so it was one pot where we would have a successful program, giving back, so to speak, paying forward and supporting a program that was very new and that might not get those minimum numbers to run at a break-even line. We'd be able to support those programs because it takes usually 3 years to get a program fully up and running and to be sustainable. And so we were able to reinvest our program funding to make it more sustainable, which meant we weren't canceling programs, which meant we got more students to go abroad, which means those students came back and could finally promote the program for us and get those newer programs to sustainable levels. And then when they became sustainable, those funds were reinvested to support new programs that needed it as well.
Yeah, I think that's all we have time for now. Looks like there's some students gathering outside.
All right, thank you.
So I thank Carrie. Any comments, feel free to email me, dmessage, dmesseng@uwy.edu. Happy to collect your thoughts. And thanks again for coming out. That went well, thank you.
Thank you so much. And the check works for it?
I guess I gotta take this, I know. Okay.
Let me know when I can pull it.
Yeah, you're good. I'm gonna take this.
Reading the plan, we don't have
Every institution is different.
Yeah, but it would make it would be really helpful with this. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hold on.